loud. Okay, so welcome everyone to our International Women's Day webinar panel discussion. I am Genevieve Uno, founder of Social Root Consulting, and I have Mario Tomo, my colleague and partner of Social Root Consulting, also who will be facilitating this panel discussion. I first off just want to say thank you to everyone who is participating and attending. This is a really exciting opportunity for Social Root, and we're just really excited to have a space where we can have really cool discussions that are really safe and open to exploring different ways of seeing like a different perspective. Before we get started, I just want to do a few housekeeping items. Specifically around the attendees, thank you for coming. You do not have a voice option or control, so we cannot hear you if you try to verbally ask a question. Instead, we ask you to use the Q&A function that's provided on the webinar platform. So Mari will be mining those questions and we'll have a chance to answer those at the end of the panel. If you do have a burning question, don't be afraid to, again, just bring that attention to Mari and she'll do her best to make sure that it's answered. During the panel, I just want to remind everyone, those who are asking questions and those who are participating as panelists, that we have a respectful dialogue and that we come with a lens of understanding. We really want this to be a safe space where we can express different perspectives. It's important that we kind of have that as a foundation so that the dialogue can be interesting and open. So I first just wanted to also give a little intro of who is Social Root Consulting. Some of you are familiar with the work that Mari and I and the other consultants have been doing. We started Social Root in 2017, and our purpose is really to elevate the efforts of government, business, and organizations to be courageous leaders in their community. And we do that by supporting the creation of new socially and environmentally conscious systems. And we do that by research projects, facilitation and workshops, as well as development projects. Did I already say development projects? No, I said research. We have 3 streams in which we try to operate in. And I also wanted to acknowledge some of the territories in which we are based out of, here in Port Alberni and in Vancouver. So I just wanted to acknowledge the unceded traditional territories of the Hupetchisut and Sayshat here in the Alberni Valley, as well as the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish people, whom are the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. So welcome. That was a bit of an introduction, but you got to get through that. So why are we here? We're here to celebrate and to discuss gender equality, and it's a perfect time to discuss gender equality because today is International Women's Day. I'm really excited to have a topic like this and to discuss a topic like this with such an amazing panel. We have created a theme for our own event, and that's really around discovering pathways for individual and collective expression for gender equality. And for attendees and panelists both, we really want there to be a sparked interest and curiosity around understanding what gender equality means in our worlds. A curiosity to learn what and how women in Canada are contributing towards gender equality, and really for people to discover and find their own way to think about this topic. Because I think we are capable of finding, you know, what gender equality means in our daily lives and contributing to this complex topic. It's not one that we can quickly answer or find solutions for. I love that this day is recognized because not only are we holding space to have conversations like these through a panel discussion, but organizations and communities around the world are celebrating the contributions that they're making and recognizing women and men and children and people in the world who are actively promoting and raising awareness. And that could look like challenging gender norms, empowering each other, celebrating diversity, breaking down those stereotypes or having conversations and identifying those stereotypes, which results in rejecting those binaries that can be quite constraining, and really in the end mobilizing and taking action for a really significant movement that we've been seeing over the years. Lastly, I wanted to take note that this International Women's Day specifically marks the 25th anniversary of the adoption of the Beijing Platform for Action. And what we'll do is we'll provide a link to that report and to those resources at the end of this panel. But in that Beijing Platform for Action, they addressed and reviewed the 2030 SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. And they discussed and reported on the progress, gaps, and challenges related to the advancement of gender equality and women's rights. So with all of this in mind and kind of setting the stage and setting the platform, I wanted to introduce our panelists for the discussion. They're not in any specific order. They're not even in alphabetical order. They're just in the way that I printed it. So first, I would like to introduce Michelle Mateus. If you can give her a wave, great, thank you. She is an award-winning professional photographer whose work is centered around human connection. She quotes, "I get to know my clients and learn the stories they want to tell before my camera ever comes out. Together, we co-create timeless photos that perfectly capture who they are and how they feel." Her sessions don't end when a client leaves her camera. She ensures that people have artwork and heirlooms that she can show off in prints and cherish for years to come. Michelle has over 15 years experience in community development, where she discovered her passion for learning and sharing stories as a way to connect with others. Now she brings those values to her work as a photographer. Welcome, Michelle. We're excited to have you. Our second panelist is Teresa Ryder. Give us a wave, Teresa. Thank you. She works as the Director of Business Development at the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada, also known as ITAC. Teresa is of Musqueam descent, born in the Lower Mainland and raised on Vancouver Island. She holds a Bachelor of Arts with a major of criminology from Simon Fraser University. Before joining ITAC, Teresa worked for the Aboriginal Tourism Association of BC, as well as in various roles throughout the hospitality industry. Her passion for working with people and joy in learning from and about other Indigenous communities has led her to her career in tourism and community development. Welcome, Teresa. We also have Mayor Josie Osborne. Welcome. Josie is serving her third term as mayor of Tofino. Born in BC and raised on Vancouver Island, Josie's first career was in marine biology. After completing her Master's of Resource Management at Simon Fraser University, she moved to Tofino in 1998 to work as a fisheries biologist for the Nuu-Chah-Nulth Tribal Council. Her decision to run for public office in 2012 came after friends and colleagues encouraged her to bring her collaborative and positive style of leadership to local government. And she now cites her 7 years as a mayor as the most professionally and personally rewarding experience she has had yet. Josie is a sought-after speaker and a strong supporter of women in science and politics. Welcome, Josie. And our fourth panelist is Manpreet Dhillon. Hi, Manpreet, if you wouldn't mind giving a wave. Great. Manpreet has a deep passion for creating spaces for equal opportunities for women of culturally diverse backgrounds. Manpreet's vision of the world is a place of unity and connection where individuals understand the similarities between who they are while celebrating their differences. She is furthering her mission as the founder and CEO of Visa, which creates safe spaces and builds a deeper sense of belonging within organizations and communities through the lens of diversity and inclusion in a global market. Manpreet has over 15 years of diversity and inclusion training, leadership coaching, human resources, and community development expertise. Through Visa, she has worked with notable organizations globally, including UN affiliate Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, UN Women, City of Vancouver, University of British Columbia, 7-Eleven, Terramera, as well as a host of tech and biotech companies and nonprofit organizations. Manpreet has designed and led workshops and training both in person and online in the areas of diversity and inclusion, women in leadership, human resources, and coaching. Welcome, Manpreet. So if you haven't already discovered, we have a very impressive panel with a wealth of knowledge from diverse backgrounds and diverse career fields. And we really wanted to highlight that because as we get through the questions and as we start generating really cool discussions, I also wanted to highlight that these are working women who live, play, and work, play, and live in Canada. So it's interesting, and it's a pleasure just to have all of you here with your different perspectives and backgrounds. So what I'll do is we'll get the panelists warmed up a little bit with a short question, and I'll let anyone who wants to go first to respond, and then we'll just go in a natural order. What does the theme Each for Equal mean to you, and why is it important to you? And we'll unmute you.
Okay, did that work? Okay, I like the little linky thing disappeared. I have too many windows open. I actually really love this theme because I feel that sometimes things feel so big and people feel like they just don't even know where to start. And I always think of, small imperfect steps and like that you can make every day towards whatever the big goal is. And so just thinking about like what you can do personally for me, I don't know, it just makes it feel more achievable, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it can feel really overwhelming to think about how you can contribute to gender equality or what that even means for you. So I like your perspective, Michelle, on how it's a little bit more of a digestible concept.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, my undergrad was in social justice, and I know when I graduated university, all these things that you're thinking about, your head's exploding and you feel like lost, you don't know how to contribute, and it just feels so big. But I think if you just make it into bite-sized pieces and think of like how you can walk every day living and being the example of what you wish to see in the world, I think it makes it feel more comfortable and doable.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome.
I can go next. For me, I also love this theme because I think it really shows on how everyone has a responsibility for providing equality, like everything from organizations to individuals and the community, and that women themselves also have, women need to step into the opportunities, but then also we have the systems need to be set up for them as well. And each of us, on a daily basis, we can contribute in different ways. Just as Michelle was saying, but there's like, you can do the little things, but also you can change, with like when we're working with organizations, we actually create opportunities, and those equal opportunities is so important. And I was just having a discussion on Facebook with someone else about International Men's Day and Women's Day and how important it is to think about equality for everyone, and what that, there's a lot of, we know why we celebrate International Women's Day and how important it is because we have so much work to still do. But it's so important to celebrate all genders as well, and making sure there's quality for every gender there is. So.
Thanks, Manpreet. And you bring some really key ideas there, and I'm sure we'll unpack some of those as we continue with our discussion. But one that kind of jumped out at me was the sense of responsibility, and not just a sense of responsibility for women, but for all genders and for all walks of life to recognize how they can contribute. So thank you. Teresa.
Testing me using technology before I've had a lot of coffee this morning. When I think about Each for Equal, I echo the other women on the panel that have spoken so far. I think it's about finding our own space and claiming that space for ourselves, but for creating opportunities for others. And maybe later in the panel, we'll talk a little bit more about my work, but you know, being an Indigenous woman and creating some space for opportunity for the youth that are upcoming, for future generations, is something that I'm very passionate about. And really, as I was preparing for this panel, thinking about, you know, what is my legacy as part of even just this conversation, but what are we leaving behind? And you know, through conversations like this, how are we creating opportunities for the future and for, you know, a world where we don't have to be fighting so hard for equal rights for women or for you know, any other diverse reasons that bring us together.
Thanks, Teresa. Really impactful concepts, thinking about not only the conversation we're having today, but what is the ripple effect or the lasting factors to these conversations, and how can we action not only these topics, but ensuring that we're setting a positive plan or positive steps forward so that future generations can see benefit, and, like you said, not have to work so hard in balancing that pendulum. Thank you. Josie.
Thank you. Well, I'm not surprised that there's quite a convergence here on what this theme means to each of us as the panelists and women here. But Each for Equal, for me, I'm really excited that this was picked to be the theme this year, because the each does really convey that sense of responsibility, and a number of the other panelists have already touched on this, and that personal responsibility that we all have to not only be the change that we wish to see, but for me, especially in the line of work that I do, to create and institutionalize the changes that we need to see to support more women doing the kind of work that I do, or the kind of work that we're all doing. It's also an inclusive theme, in the sense that Each for Equal, it's each of us, and regardless of gender or regardless of background, that we each have that responsibility. And I've been engaged in a lot of conversations lately at political conventions and training seminars and things like that around women in politics. And the questions that I get from a lot of men are, well, what about me in terms of, like, what can I do and how can I support more women who are in politics? And that's really exciting to me to see that. And it's made me really think about the responsibility that everybody has, regardless of gender, to support women being engaged and involved in politics. Thank you.
Thanks, Josie. Also some really great points, specifically around, I really liked hearing from you that there are people coming up to you and asking how they can contribute, and that gender equality is not just a women's issue, it's everyone's responsibility. And so to see that men and youth are starting to engage around how they can support not just women's equality, but gender as a whole. And I think that's really powerful, and we're starting to see a lot more awareness and consciousness around everyone's responsibility. So thank you for bringing that up as well. Well, I think we're off to a really great start. Even if, you know, if technology failed now, I'd be like, this was a success. I'm just so excited to hear everyone's introductions and to what the theme means. So I will go into our main meat section of the discussion, and what I'll do is we'll go in the same order. I guess that makes more sense. But our first question for discussion is, tell us a little bit about how, in your professional roles, you are contributing to this theme, how your role is connecting to it. So this could be through projects, your leadership, the ideas you bring forth, how you combat stereotypes, or any personal experiences that you've had in your professional or personal lives. So we'll start with you, Michelle.
Okay, sorry, I was looking for that button. It keeps disappearing. Okay, so much came to my mind when I read this question. And like I said earlier, the other panelists weren't here. I've made notes, but I might just forget about those. I feel like my job, so I'm a photographer, and I, up until now, have really focused on like weddings and families and businesses, but more recently I've moved into boudoir photography, and I love it. And I think it's such a taboo area of photography. And one thing that I feel like, and I was listening to a podcast about this last night, that it's almost a movement where we are celebrating ourselves as women, and we have sexuality, and it's okay to talk about it. And I feel like we are always shaming women, like, you're too frumpy, you're too this, you're too done up. And so I feel like my role is just to create space for women. They can be whoever they want to be and express themselves in an artistic way, like with my support. And I think it's so powerful watching women come and share the space with me, and just being who they want to be. And sometimes they don't even know when I ask them these questions. And I feel like there's all these stereotypes around what a woman should be. And then all those stereotypes are like challenging each other. Like, we don't even know. So like, I love the role that I have doing this type of intimate portraiture, because it really just gives them space to explore that side of themselves, which is okay. Like, it's okay to want to feel sensual and beautiful. And I feel like we vilified that so much in our society. And it's okay to look that way, and you're not inviting something, you're just doing it for yourself. And so that for me has been really powerful and really strong. And the stories that I hear, and there's the experience that I'm able to provide, but the impact on women, it's so much more. And yeah, I'm really excited about sharing that kind of intimate space with women and helping them just come into their own bodies. I actually, this morning, I was on like Apple News, and Chatelaine has a big story if you guys all want to check it out. And women were talking about this exact topic, not boudoir, but just their relationship with their bodies and how complex that is. And so I feel like my role is kind of trying to challenge that and saying, like, I know it's complicated. I don't expect you to love it, but just come here and explore and see what that means for you and how that feels for you. And it's awesome. It's really powerful, really moving. So that's, yeah.
Michelle, I want to touch on your journey into this type of photography. Were there any hesitations for moving into boudoir photography for you personally? Like, what were some of the challenges or some of the dialogue you had in realizing that there's, it's such a great opportunity to break down those negative stereotypes or negative feelings around people's bodies, but where you can celebrate instead. So
right.
I'll share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, so I started my business, it's going to be 5 years old in April. And when I actually first started, that's what I thought I wanted to do, because before, I kind of mentioned earlier, I did an undergrad in social justice with a minor in feminist theory. I worked in domestic violence services for a long time, and I kind of always had this relationship with supporting women. And when I first became a photographer, that's what I wanted to do. But I feel that I didn't really have the guidance or know how to do it. And I felt like really overwhelmed and frazzled, and I didn't like it. And it wasn't until September where I was able to hear the speaker speak about her vision. And it was like pounding in my heart, like wanting to be able to do that. And so I didn't really have any apprehensions. I threw myself into it like overnight pretty much. And it's just shaking everything up for me, like wanting to kind of really transition my business to only being that, because in this short time, I've just seen the power of these kind of sessions. I think the hardest part is telling people about it. Like, I told a really good friend, and she was like, well, I'm not the boudoir type. And I was like, what does that mean? Like, you're a woman, you have a body, you have whatever you want to have to express. So I think that there's just all these stereotypes about what it is and why. And like, why is it not okay for a woman to want to feel this way and express herself this way? So that kind of fires me up even more. And my whole platform is just doing it for yourself. So it doesn't have to be plastered all over the internet or whatever, but you know, the stories are incredible to what brings women here. So I feel like it's more kind of this idea that it's porn or kinky or this or that, like, again, like all these things. And it's like, well, it's not at all. So why is it when we're talking about women's bodies and them expressing themselves with their body or through their body as a beautiful form of art, are all these kind of stereotypes coming up? So that really fires me up. Like, so yeah, I personally am like feeling like I'm kind of fielding those questions all the time.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing. And one thing that also comes to mind is while you're describing the experiences that these women are having and the line of work that you do, is I think the stereotype or the original portrait of a woman in lingerie or in whatever form was for a male lens or male gaze. And I think there's a real transition to what you're providing, in that this is for yourself, and you know, whether it is for your significant other or not, but it's discovering what you feel is sexy and portraying that. And I think that's really powerful work that you do.
Totally, right? And I mean, I kind of always joke that someone may benefit from that, but like, women show up here for themselves, you know, and, you know, I like, it's blowing my mind what drives them here. And I think a lot of women are curious because they feel disconnected with their body. And I don't just mean in getting in lingerie, because a lot of the times they're not, although there is this joke that people feel more comfortable the more clothes they take off, because they start to just peel away those layers literally. And they're like, is it okay if I just like take my bra off? Like, could you just do a profile? Because they're like, okay, I'm actually feeling good in my body right now. What would this look like? And I only shoot in black and white as well, to just kind of get rid of all of the distractions and really have it be focused on the woman. And so she is often here just being curious while she's nervous at first. It's so cool. Like, so, but I don't think we're encouraged to do that with our body. You're like, put it away. Why? Like I said, like, there's all these things about our bodies. And we do it to each other too, as women. So that's another problem. Like, let's just appreciate however women want to decorate, explore, express their bodies and themselves, you know?
Thank you, Michelle. Yes.
You're welcome.
Awesome. We'll move on to the next panelist. I believe that was it Manpreet who spoke second?
Yeah, it was me.
Yeah.
So my whole life kind of revolves around this equal for equal. From everything that we do with the diversity inclusion work, working with organizations, countries, and even industry level, like, how do we provide, you know, equity of opportunities for everyone, all underrepresented groups. And then the cool thing is, like, I get to work with a lot of people who are wanting to help and they want to be allies, but they don't know how. So through a lot of conversations, when we have like with working with these like groups of men who are really trying to access their own emotions, because they're like, we will be better partners, we'll be understand women better, and as we understand our own femininity. And it's been really powerful to see and how they've become started creating spaces for their own partners and the women in their lives to be more empowered, and making sure that they're economically equal, and all those kind of spaces. Because a lot of these, you know, and so many of these conversations, these men are like, we want to bring what we want to do, what we can do for all the women in our lives, because we're so tired of them being treated in a certain way. And I get to see that translated from like when we're at home to all of our volunteer work to like the organization. So it's been really neat to see how everyone's stepping up for each other. I mean, there's some challenging days, which I'll talk about on the next question, for sure. But I mean, one of the coolest projects that I think that it's just like so close to my heart was, there's two really, like, we worked with developing a career development project, a career development curriculum for skilled immigrants coming into the country. And as we looked at it with the coaching lens and really focusing on how the strengths that they're bringing with them. And that's actually the curriculum is based on, and through Immigrant Employers Council of BC. And it's so powerful to see as people are graduating from the program, they're like, they started to see their own strength, and that's how they started to empower other people as well. And that's like the, you know, underlying for everything I do is like, how do we empower one person? Because we know that that's when they'll empower others. and that's why they'll stop taking power away. And so it's been so neat to see that into action. And then even with building up capacity for HR professionals and what they do in the workplaces for the various projects, you really start, people like me, like everyone just comes to the table and like, how can I help? And that's been the most rewarding to see, like where people are just stepping up and being like, how can I help? And actually giving them, here, this is how you do it. And we, like even we're like, here's the steps you take, here you can benchmark it. You can benchmark where your organization is through this assessment tool, but here's the steps you can take. And people are just loving to knowing what they can do based on like even, Josie, what you were saying as well about people wanting to know how they can help. And so it's been really neat to see. It's been amazing to see the power of everyone just wants to help people and everyone wants to help each other and really create a better place. So that's how I get to contribute to this all the time.
That really speaks to me in terms of when you were talking about feeling empowered, and when you feel empowered and you have a sense of confidence, how your voice can really be amplified, and you want to share your learned perspectives or your learned experiences with others. And I think that's the relationship that's really important there, is supporting others so that they can feel confident enough to share their story and share their voice with others. And so that was a really cool piece that you shared there. So what are some of the challenges that you feel are in your line of work, and how have you, I guess, actioned those to create positive movements towards, I guess, some of the...
Yeah, so the challenges, so Friday was a really tough day, and it was really it started with conversations around genocide, racism, and how people, with the coronavirus, there's a level of racism that's being increased. And then with everything happening in Iran, and there's like, and then the frontline workers, they're not fully supported all the time. And so there's burnout, compassion fatigue, and all those things going on. And where, and then I was hearing about some diversity inclusion teams where they are not providing equal opportunities for people of different backgrounds, where some people don't have a voice at the table if they're from India, or these women have been in these roles for a while, but the men will be like, oh no, this is what there's this inequality even on the diversity inclusion teams. And you kind of look at it and like, especially with the diversity inclusion teams, or the people who are frontline doing the work, I'm like, these are the people who are right in the trenches. They're trying to make the difference, and they're actually dealing with the brunt of all the challenges. And you have all these amazing people burning out, exhausted, and they're just like, screw this, like I don't know what to do. And they're being harmed as people. They're being harmed. Like they can't even, they're like, we don't even know how to function on a daily basis anymore because we are feeling so much trauma, and the resources aren't being provided there. And I mean, I get to the point where I'm like, I'm exhausted, so I need to take like days off. When someone, it's funny because a friend and I were talking, and he does a lot of speaking. He's like, don't you find that some days when you do like a 2-hour talk afterwards, you're like, I'm done for the day? I'm like, oh yeah, totally. Like you're just like, you're just like, that was all the work I could do today. I'm done. I'm going to go and like sit in a bath and not talk to anyone for the rest of the day. But I think that's where the numbers aren't always changing. You feel like you're doing this never ending fight. You don't really always see the results. And so I think one of the biggest things that I always have to try to look at is like, what's the win for each day? And which is hard sometimes because you're just like, I want the statistics to change. When you get like these statistics back and you're like, oh, great, the women of color are the lowest. They've gone, actually the numbers have decreased on boards, or the numbers have decreased in like leadership. And you're like, so all the work I'm doing is kind of like, really, what am I doing this for? And so, I think that's the biggest thing is numbers have been decreasing. And there's a lot of, I feel like the racism has increased in so many ways, and all the other sexism and everything else. And, one of the hardest conversations I had was someone working with this organization on sexual harassment. And these men, they were like, oh, we've never reported to a woman. We don't know how to report to a woman. And then they also thought they can sleep with their secretaries. And you're like, this is like generations and generations cultural programming that they have that I'm trying to undo at this point, and I don't know how to deal with that. And so, I mean, obviously we have some tools, but like you're bringing, so it's just tough sometimes.
Challenging, yes. Those are not obviously easy conversations to have, and I just wanted to congratulate you for being in that space, because it's a very challenging space. And I understand and relate to you when you say, you know, you've had, maybe it's only a 30-minute conversation or a 2-hour presentation, but the energy that it takes to receive other people's energy and exude that kind of energy can be quite exhausting, and especially in a topic around diversity and inclusion. So thank you, Manpreet, for sharing. We'll pass it over to Teresa.
Thank you. I feel like before I tell you a little bit about how and what I do with my career, I have to kind of start with how I got to work in Indigenous tourism and kind of my pathway to be there. As a kid growing up on Vancouver Island, and being of mixed descent, I was often, I could fit in with, you know, either my Indigenous friends or my non-Indigenous friends, and kind of coast between the two groups. But something that I always struggled with was claiming that space, claiming the space to be an Indigenous person and to identify that way. When I went to university and I was a criminology major, I learned about how overrepresented are in the prison populations, how our women are overrepresented in terms of you know, high murder rates with the murdered and missing Indigenous women, and overall just some of the social issues that our communities face. So when I was presented with the opportunity to work in Indigenous tourism, it kind of melded my worlds together. It was a way that through my work, I was able to create positive impact and create positive identity and space for Indigenous people to hold our heads high and really tell our story, which is so important. I mean, intrinsically as Indigenous people, that's what we have done. But when I looked at the opportunities for, you know, our entrepreneurs or for our communities to have business opportunities where we could keep our people at home and connected to our territories, it was just an immediate fit. It was something that immediately fit within how I see the world and how I understand the world. And so through this, it's kind of been a progression and a project that we've been growing over the last 10 or so, well, I should say 5 or so years at the national level, but really looking at what those opportunities are and helping community members or entrepreneurs focus on that. And I should say with this group, we do work with a large, there's lots of women in our organization. I work with a lot of powerhouse women and women who really come together to, you know, make sure that we're making the most impact for our communities, our business owners, and our people, so that, you know, in the future, you know, when visitors are coming or when Canadians are trying to have a better understanding of who their neighbors are, we can provide that space to have that conversation.
I love the lens that you bring to Indigenous tourism. For those who don't know, Teresa and I do work together, so I have the privilege of seeing her in action on a fairly regular basis. And the work that you do on the national level is so impressive. And the words that you are using really speak to identity and empowering people in communities and in business to realize their ability to break out of these, you know, stereotypes that people impose on Indigenous people. And I see the positive change that is happening within the organization and the membership. So it's really powerful work. I do want to ask though, what are some of the challenges that you feel from like a personal level or professional, but maybe you could dive a little bit more into them. I know you spoke a little bit, but can you expand a little bit more on specifically around gender equality or women's rights? Are there any things you wanted to touch on there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we look at tourism and hospitality, I think that, you know, I've spent most of my career working alongside women. As always, we have challenges getting women into the boardrooms. When we look, I was just a labor market session, and when we look at the women at the top, we don't have as much space there as what we should. I don't know that it's purposeful. I think that it's just that, again, we have to be bold and claim that space. I really liked what Michelle said earlier. It's kind of the same opportunity to just be bold and say, you know, this is the opportunity that I'm going after, and be the role models for the women that are upcoming. I always like to think about it from that lens. You know, we're in such a position. We touched on it a little bit earlier, but I think the next generation coming before us is really a lot more tolerant and more open to the idea of not setting boundaries or borders when it comes to defining who a person is, and being more accepting. And to me, that's really an optimistic future. You know, we have something to look forward to where we're not set between the boundaries. As a woman, I do find myself sometimes questioning, like, is this my space to own? And I've just committed to myself to you know, be bold and really dig into the opportunities that are presented, and not let the fact that I'm a woman or that I'm Indigenous be something that makes me question, like, is this my space to have?
Thank you, Teresa. Josie.
Thanks. Wow, where to start? This is so fantastic listening to everybody. I have to say, I think for me, a lot of what I do now is built on something that it took me a while to acknowledge, which was that I'm really fortunate, and I've had very few barriers to entering the kinds of roles and professions that I wanted to enter. So I grew up in a really happy household. I'm a settler, white woman who, middle class, had access to education and opportunity, and very fortunately really never had any adults in my life tell me that I couldn't do what I wanted to do. And so that opened up a pathway that is, you know, and I now know how few people are lucky enough to experience that. So that acknowledgement, along with the sense of responsibility that comes with it, to institutionalize programs and processes that enable more women to do what I've been able to do, is something that's really important to me. And along with that is that gratitude that I think we all feel for the people who came before us. So the people who carved out the pathways to enable me to do what I've been able to do, whether it was to get a degree in marine biology or to become a mayor of a town. So it's really become part of my whole kind of modus operandi. Like, how I operate is thinking about how to pay it forward, and how to encourage other people, but how to also educate myself as to why people, women especially, can't do sometimes the things that they want to do. And what's really interesting is that when I made the decision to run for mayor, I had a lot of hesitation about it. And when I finally decided to do it, and I really, really love what I do, but in time, I've come to see that all of the reasons that I hesitated from stepping forward to doing this are very, very common stories for women wanting or thinking or being encouraged to enter public office. And that's led me down this path of doing a lot more research and building understanding about the underrepresentation of women in political offices and in, well, you know, at the board table, like Teresa was saying, and what the systemic and structural barriers are to that, and the ones that I've experienced and now acknowledge that I've experienced, and how I can change things. And so for me, one of the really big things that I've been focused on in the last few years is really working with the institutions and organizations that I'm a part of to create space for women to have these very conversations. And it's quite shocking to me that after over 100 years of local government in British Columbia, that at our main conferences where we all get together as local government elected officials, there until recently had not been any space created in convention programs or in seminars for women to simply talk about these issues and to address them. So that's something that I think has been really, really important for me. And challenges, I spoke to some of the challenges. I think coming to see, for me, a really big thing is understanding how, although there are more women doing what I do, there's still not enough. So about 29% of the mayors in British Columbia are women, and about, I'm just looking at my notes here, 29% of MPs in Canada are women. 39% of MLAs are in BC are women, which is actually the highest across Canada. And if things continue the way they've been going with every provincial election, within 2 or 3 elections, we could have gender parity. And gender parity in politics is so key for so many things. And it's not just about representation of women and family issues, because women are more likely to represent family-related policy and to really fight for it, but to actually change the very structure and way we conduct politics. And I think that a lot, I'm sure that a lot of you, you see question period, or you see the way people talk to each other on Twitter or in other forms of social media, and it's appalling. And that's part of this institutionalized way of this culture that somehow we think that we need to be and be a part of, that it's combative and it's aggressive. And that's something I think that women are really, really changing. So I'll stop there. And I know, Genevieve, you've got questions, I'm sure.
Thank you, Josie. Really great concepts that you're bringing up. And I know for me personally, I've always shied away from politics or being involved. And I really had to look inside and ask myself, why am I shy to engage in politics? And in the last election here in Port Alberni, there was a real movement around involving women in politics and kind of breaking down those perceived barriers of, women engaging in politics and running for council, and that is space for women to engage in. And the start of that movement in the last election really got me thinking in terms of why I haven't traditionally, and how I can in the future engage in politics, whether that's like running for council or just simply supporting those who are running for a position. So thank you. I think you're bringing some really great positive points there. So we've got a couple questions. What I'll do is I'll just read out the question, and then maybe we can just do a bit of a popcorn style response. Firstly, I just wanted to say thank you for each of you for sharing your perspective and your stories and your experience. All so unique and also valuable. I've so far really enjoyed hearing where each of you have come from and where you're going. So the question I have from the audience is, what avenues do each of you take to empower women in your communities? And what advice can you give to other women to do the same?
So I think one of the biggest things that I'm always like pushing for and doing is, when opportunities come across my desk for either board positions or roles, jobs, or opportunities to speak, or whatever else there might be an access to help another woman build her personal brand or build her career, I will always introduce at least 3 other women, like 1 to 3 other women to that opportunity. And we have our own Facebook group that I'll just post it there so people know that there's these opportunities available. And then also, I always encourage every other woman to do the same. Like, all of us have access to different spaces and different opportunities and different people. And so we can champion each other. And I think that's the most important thing, is about giving people access that they wouldn't have access otherwise. If you know that there's a mentorship opportunity available somewhere that's going to really help further someone's career, why not introduce someone else to that opportunity? And take care of yourself, but introduce someone else as well. Or if there's a speaking opportunity where you're like, oh, this would be better suited for someone else instead of me, why not actually introduce that other person as a speaker? Because a lot of the times, people don't know other people doing amazing work out in the community. And so unless we give them opportunities to do that, it's not going to happen. So I think that's the most important thing that we can do.
Thank you. I really love the message around championing other people. I think that's a really great message just to echo, and I just wanted to quickly say that because I think Mari also feels that it was a lovely message. So yeah, thanks for sharing that.
So I'll speak to a few things that are really important to me in my community. One is last summer I had a youth intern, a young woman who job shadowed me for a day a week throughout the summer, which was an incredible opportunity. And I was thrilled with how welcoming everyone was in my world to have her alongside. I took her to meetings, I took her out to events that I went to, I introduced her, and I think just like Manpreet was talking about, giving other people a platform or a place to be. And I think, again, that just comes back to the responsibility that a person like me has to, I'm thrilled and really humbled by the fact that I'm able to inspire other women. And so then it's about lifting them up and supporting them. The other thing that's really important, and I've never met a female politician who hasn't said this, but it is about getting out there and finding people to replace me or to encourage them to run for council. So Genevieve, it's great what you were saying about the Port Alberni city election, because there was a big change for Port Alberni in the last municipal election. And I think some of that came from my colleagues who supported particular people to run in our neighboring town and helped really give women a sense that they can do this and create a safe space for them to talk about why they think they might not be able to do it, and then support them once they are in office. So those are two things that I've been doing in my community.
Great, thank you. Michelle.
I feel like I just want to add to this same kind of theme here where I end up mentoring a lot of photographers, female photographers. One of the biggest things in my industry is that it's not regulated. Anyone can buy a camera now. It's way more accessible. Professionalism is on this whole wide gamut. Nobody really knows how to start. And most people, especially women, undervalue their time and their work. And so when you're looking at just even pricing, how do you even do that? And it's so hard and complicated. And for me, it's always about just doing the math. Like any other job, when you make up a role, they do the math to figure out how are they going to pay you? What's your skill set? And so I find that I mentor a lot of photographers on just how to value themselves. And I don't charge them for that time. I feel like I wish I would have. I fumbled my way through this industry until I got a swift kick in the butt and realized I wasn't making any money. I wasn't valuing myself and my work and the skill sets I bring to that. And so now I just feel like it's like my duty to share with other photographers who are quite honestly mostly women, which is so awesome to see. But what's interesting in my industry is there's still such a gap, and I think like many, where we've got kind of the top end who are males, and they are charging and they are valuing their work, and they're kind of approaching it with a whole different mindset. Whereas the women, especially a lot that I talk to, are like, am I worth it? Will people pay me? And it's like, we need to own that space, that we are creating important heirlooms and memories for people to cherish forever and pass that on to their family, and being okay with that, and being okay with charging what we're worth. And I'm so passionate about that. And I host group meetups here, and anyone that wants to ask me, I will talk their ear off about why they should value themselves and their time away from their family and their work. And it's actually quite sad how many women don't. So many people are like, oh no, if I do that, there's so much fear around, kind of standing up for yourself and your value. But once, all you gotta do is the math, is what I tell people, because then you start to see, but they're still so scared. So for me and my photography community here, I'm always so willing to talk to people about that and help them kind of come over and see that their work is important, they're important, they have value, and that it's okay to charge for that.
Thank you. That's another very powerful message. I think I want to almost speak for the audience, but I know certainly within Social Root, we have those conversations around realizing our value as it relates to our skill set. So I think your message definitely crosses various fields. Thank you.
You're welcome. So
unless there's another response for this particular question, I do have one more question. I know, Teresa, you didn't get a chance to speak, so I'll just, if you'd like to have the opportunity, there's time. Okay. So the other question that we have, and we might only have time for a couple responses here, but how do we as individuals contribute to system levels change? Teresa.
I think, when we think about the theme Each for Equal, it is really about what we're able to contribute and how we're telling the story. As I was thinking about the last question, it's raising up the people, the women that are doing a great job, or maybe they've struggled, or maybe there's, a way to tell our stories of how we got to where we are and sharing those experiences, but also finding a space to claim that conversation so that we can come together and make small changes. You look at Greta, you look at Autumn Peltier, these young women that are making big strides just by being a voice, the face of many voices of people that believe in their message and that stand behind them. And so I think if we just really have conviction with the stories that were our space, telling the stories of our own selves, that has big impact. Systemic change, I don't know, but if ever is really starting to stand up for what we believe in and not really having conviction, have impact, to raise our voices towards what we really believe in.
Thank you, Teresa. You did, you were broken there for a little bit, but thank you so much for sharing. I think we caught that at the end a little bit there, so thank you. That's all the time we have to respond to questions. I do want to respect the time of the panelists and the attendees, and we will be closing this event at 11. There's been so many words and concepts that we've started to discuss and have thoroughly explored, and I just want to say again, thank you to the panelists for bringing those perspectives to this discussion. Some of the larger points that I've kind of written down, or that are takeaways from this conversation, are to really support or champion others. I think there's real power in having a strong community of people who have a united vision, or several visions towards a positive future. And so I think that's one of the largest messages that I heard in this panel. I also heard words like claiming space, responsibility, legacy, as well as understandings of intersectionality. When we talk about women's rights, there are multiple ideas around how we can positively contribute towards women's rights, and we do have to take into consideration age, sex, race, and all other components that create identity and community. There was a little bit of talk around allyship, which I think is also really important and powerful. Like I said in the beginning, this is not just a women's issue, it's everyone's issue, and it trickles into business, it trickles into politics, to the personal relationships you hold with family and others. So I really see so many, it's like a web of factors that really contribute towards a positive action towards gender equality. And so thank you so much for each of you for highlighting the unique ways that we can start advancing this topic and this movement. I think I will leave it there for today. Like I have said throughout, I'm thrilled for the opportunity to be able to host this, for Social Root to be able to host this. And thank you again to our panelists. Your expertise is so valuable, and your contributions were really meaningful today. I hope that everyone who attended enjoyed the session, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their Sunday. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.